Recording in progress.
Again, good morning to everyone. We are 326 so far. So, are the others planning to enter? Should we wait for a few more minutes for them before I start? O wala, walang sumasagot. Somebody. Okay. All right. Let's go. Before I start, I would like to welcome everyone to Surgery 2. All right. Congratulations for passing Surgery 1. And I hope this school year will be a lot better for everyone. Okay, for the lecture this morning, I would be discussing head and neck surgery in general. So it's a very broad uh, section of surgery, and I will be discussing yung mga important diseases lang concerning head and neck. So this will be the objectives. Um, For the first part of this lecture, I hope to be able to discuss with you the basic principles and philosophy applied in the diagnosis and management of head and neck diseases. So, I would be discussing a little bit of anatomy so that we can correlate. And then I would also be describing the most common or more common surgical diseases or conditions of the head and neck. So, there. This would include, like I said, a little bit of anatomy, epidemiology, diagnostics. Well, if we are talking about cancer, so there will be staging as well as management and prognosis. So this is going to be the outline. There. So for the first part, I will give an overview and spectrum of the head and neck disorders. Um, I will also be discussing not only tumor but non-tumor disorders of the head and the neck. So for the tumors of the head and neck, I'll be discussing both benign and malignant diseases. So these are just examples of tumors actually of the head and neck. These are actual patients that we operated on. So um, this will not, this discussion will not include thyroid and parathyroid. We will have a separate lecture on this. So head and neck diseases comprise a complex anatomical region where different pathologies may affect the individual's ability to see, smell, hear, speak, or even drink and breathe. So this also includes the upper air digestive tract. Only 20% of the total body surface area ang head and neck. So management has varied functional, psychosocial, and economic impact to the patient. So it's very important to address these diseases. Um, for head and neck disorders, these can actually cause significant cosmetic and functional impairment. So very debilitating if you have diseases in this area. For this slide, you can see that diseases of the head and neck comprise both benign and malignant disorders. So for benign diseases, you have infectious, inflammatory, it can be congenital. For malignant, of course, we are talking about cancer, which is fairly common in the head and neck region. So this is just a picture of possible treatment for head and neck diseases. Well, it's a summary of some sort. So for benign diseases, if it's management of benign diseases would depend on the cause, of course. So if it's a tumor, surgical management is an option, of course. For infection, we have antibiotic as well as surgical. All right. So at the end of the lecture, I don't expect you guys to be head and neck surgeons. So I just want you to be familiar with the diseases concerning this part of the body. So let's start. Like I said a while ago, um, benign conditions include tumor. Okay, it doesn't necessarily be malignant. Tumor can be benign or malignant. For the first part, I would be discussing the benign conditions, well, of the head and neck. So both tumor and non-tumor. When I say non-tumor, it can be infection, inflammatory disorders. For non-tumor disorders, these are just examples of non-tumor disorders. This would include ear infection, sinus inflammatory disorders, um, benign disorders of the larynx. This would include your recurrent respiratory papillomatosis, laryngeal granuloma, laryngeal polyp, vocal cord cysts. Okay. Uh, Paralysis of the vocal cord is also included in vascular lesions like your hemangioma and vascular malformations. It is very important for infectious. This can be acute or chronic. So it's um, it's important that you do proper identification of etiological organism because that would affect your treatment. For ear infections, we are all familiar with. Okay, you might be confused. Okay, um, I know that some of you may be asking what's the difference between ENT and general surgery head and neck. Um, all right, mas specific lang yun sa ENT. We do not, at least for general surgery, there are certain diseases that actually we do not treat. Majority of head and neck diseases managed by general surgery are tumors. Okay, so pero ito is just an overview. I will just be discussing with you some common um, infection or non-tumor diseases of the head and neck that are mostly seen by our colleagues. Okay, so you might encounter this also in their lectures. So going back, ear infections, otitis externa, you're very familiar with this. It's also called your swimmer's ear. It's the infection of the skin of the external auditory canal. So um, there is an infection because of the moisture that persists within the canal. So that initiates the process and leads to skin maceration as well as itching. So the most common etiologic agent is your P. aeruginosa, although other bacteria or even fungi may also be implicated in this type of infection. What are the signs and the symptoms? It depends. It can during the initial phase of the disease, there is usually itching and pain with swelling of the canal as well as the soft tissue around it. So in the chronic phase, pain may subside, but there's profound itching, which occurs for prolonged periods with gradual thickening of the external part of the skin around the auditory canal. So what is the treatment for this? Since we know that this is an infection, it's important that you investigate first, especially the canal. So you do automicroscopy to be able to remove the debris if there is. Antibiotic, topical, yung mga drops, which include neomycin or polymyxin. There are also ear drops that contain quinolone, like ciprofloxacin, ciprofloxacin is the most common topical quinolone used. So, in extreme cases, especially in chronic phase, some would include steroids, such as your hydrocortisone or dexamethasone, to decrease the pain and as well as the swelling. For non-antibiotic preparations, especially in fungal infection, uh, Some would give acetic acid as well, 2% acetic acid for both mixed bacterial or fungal infection. I've been mentioning about the topical treatment. In extreme cases, systemic antibiotics can also be given. So these are reserved for those with severe infections and those with other diseases like diabetes or immunocompromised patients. Next would be your otitis media. So this implies bacterial infection of the middle ear. So this accounts for about 25% of pediatric uh, antibiotic prescription. So it's very common in pediatric patients. This is actually the most common bacterial infection in in the pediatric population. So globally, you have Haemophilus influenza and Streptococcus pneumonia as the most prevalent organisms responsible for acute, at least for acute otitis uh, media. It usually occurs before 2 years of age, and this can be secondary to immaturity or not fully developed organs in the pediatric patient, especially of the eustachian tube. Um, Other contributing factors would include upper respiratory viral infection, as well as daycare attendance. So a lot of children, I don't know if you guys have children, so some of you might have. Um, Children usually acquire infection, well, at least a lot of them do, in school. So daycare. Um, Other contributing factors for otitis media would include craniofacial conditions, which affect the eustachian tube function. Just example of which is yung cleft palate. About 20% of patients demonstrate a persistent middle ear effusion or at least 8 weeks after resolution of the acute phase. So it becomes chronic if it persists more than 8 weeks. So these are the classifications of infection for acute otitis media. Acute duration is about less than 3 weeks. So this is characterized by a sudden onset of symptom like ear pain, fever. There's red bulging eardrum, so you have to do otoscopy on these patients. Often it often follows a respiratory infection and involves fluid buildup in the middle ear. So you also see otitis media with effusion. So it involves fluid in the middle ear without signs of active infection. So this can happen also. Um, what happens is that in acute otitis media episode, this can occur after an otitis media episode, or it can occur also independently. In these cases, it can cause hearing loss or a feeling of fullness in the ear. Subacute is between 3 to 8 weeks, with which may mimic the symptoms of an acute otitis media. So for chronic, the duration is, like I said a while ago, more than 8 weeks. So there's a persistent or recurrent middle ear infection with drainage or otorrhea. Um, there's usually a perforated eardrum or ventilate, or in some cases, they put a ventilation tube to drain and avoid effusion. This can lead to long-term complications just like hearing loss or cholesteatoma. A cholesteatoma is a skin cyst in the middle ear. These are, can you see it? Sige. Um, these are the complications of ear otitis media. This otitis media, especially the chronic ones, can cause facial nerve paralysis. Uh, this can occur to an acute inflammatory process of the middle ear or even the mastoid if it's affected. So don't worry, I'll give you the slides so you don't have to copy this. Okay? Other dreaded complications of your otitis media is meningitis, which is the most common intracranial complication, otologic meningitis, which is usually seen in children, and other complications such as abscesses in the epidural, subdural, as well as brain, hydrocephalus in some cases. Okay, this is another term associated with acute otitis media, with the what we call malignant otitis media. This is a fulminant necrotizing infection of the otologic soft tissues combined with osteomyelitis of the bone or infection involving the bone. Um, Susceptible patients are those with comorbidities like diabetes, um, age-related, this is common in the elderly, as well as immunodeficient patients. In these cases, there's persistent otalgia for longer than 1 month. So if you have malignant otitis media, this requires aggressive medical therapy, which includes IV antibiotic, remember IV not oral, that covers Pseudomonas and other gram-negative bacteria as well as fungi or fungi. For treatment of uncomplicated otitis media, you can actually give oral antibiotic, first line or your amoxicillin based antibiotic as well as sulfas. Uh, in acute coalescent mastoiditis and petrositis, okay, dito na yung mga medyo complicated. Um, Management would include myringotomy, uh, as well as IV antibiotic for chronic otitis. Um, this is usually indicated for frequent acute episodes, chronic effusions persisting beyond 3 months, and those with significant conductive hearing loss. Another inflammatory disease of the head and neck is your acute sinusitis. So sinusitis is a clinical actually diagnosis based on the patient's signs and symptoms. So acute sinusitis, the symptoms persist for at least 7 to 10 days, but for less than 4 weeks. This usually follows a viral upper respiratory tract infection whereby um, sinonasal mucosal inflammation results in the closure of your sinus ostium. Etiological agents include uh, S. pneumoniae, H. influenzae, and M. catarrhalis. Um, for nosocomial acute sinusitis, Pseudomonas or Staph aureus are the more common etiologic agents. What is the treatment? Usually antibiotic that targets the most common etiologic agents. So antibiotics would include either topical or systemic decongestants, uh, nasal saline spray, um, topical steroids or oral steroids in uh, extreme cases. If it goes beyond or exceeds uh, uh, 4 weeks to 12 weeks, this is already called a subacute sinusitis. If it's beyond 12 weeks, again, it's chronic sinusitis. Patients have signs and symptoms exceeding 12 weeks. So this already require objective demonstration of muco-inflammatory disease. So in these cases, the patients or this represents a group of patients with um, multifactorial etiologies which may contribute to the osteal or bone destruction, ciliary destruction, as well as the causes the inflammation in that area. The etiological agents are um, highly variable. So, which includes higher prevalence of polymicrobial, or most of the time it's polymicrobial, and in some cases, antibiotic resistant organisms. How do you diagnose chronic sinusitis? So, uh, usually do nasal endoscopy exam. Usual findings would include purulence or polypoid changes, which supports the diagnosis of chronic sinusitis. Some would request for a CT scan to be exact. This is confirmatory. Um, what do you see in the CT scan? Usually there's mucosal thickening and or sinus opacification. So if you see mucosal thickening and sinus opacification, that's already an indication that this is a chronic sinusitis. How do you manage this then? So uh, most common treatment would include a prolonged course of antibiotic for about 3 to 6 weeks, since there's already changes in the osteum, or the bone, that area. So a prolonged antibiotic usually, the inflammation in the bone would already constitute an osteomyelitis. So antibiotic would include prolonged antibiotic, at least 3 to 6 weeks, nasal and or oral steroids, as well as nasal irrigation with saline or antibiotic solution. So, anong presentation kasi nito? Runny nose, congested, especially in the morning. So, there. Okay. Moving on. Next would be pharyngeal and adenotonsillar diseases. So, these are infectious pharyngitis, usually caused by viral infection rather than bacterial. Um, this usually presents with sore throat, dysphagia, and fever. So, tonsillar exudates and cervical adenitis or cervical lymphadenopathies may be seen, especially when the etiology is bacterial. Treatment should cover for group A beta hemolytic, strep, pyogenes, and pneumonia. For group C and G strep, H influenzae, and anaerobes, um, if there's adenitis present, symptoms may be similar to sinusitis. The most dreaded, at least one of the most dreaded complications would include rheumatic fever. So we have to prevent that. So early treatment is necessary. Candida albicans is the most common fungal cause of pharyngitis. Other causes would include C. diphtheriae, pertussis, gonorrhea, which may be secondary to syphilis, which is cause of atypical cases of pharyngitis. Okay, we're done with infection, okay, or inflammation, partly inflammation. Next, I'd be discussing other benign disorders of the larynx. So hoarseness is actually which is the principal symptom of a laryngeal disease. This may affect a wide array of patients with respect to age, gender, and socioeconomic status. It can happen to anybody. So hoarseness, the principal, like I said a while ago, the principal symptom, at least when a mass lesion is present or inflammation in the area. Other um, vocal manifestation would include hypophonia or aphonia, breathiness, and pitch breaks. Hoarseness may also be, or benign disorders of the larynx may also be associated with airway obstruction, dysphagia, as well as reflux. An important risk factor for laryngeal disorders is smoking. If the patient is a smoker, this should raise an index of suspicion of a possible malignancy, especially in elderly male patients. One of the diseases of the larynx is what we call the RRP, or the recurrent respiratory papillomatosis. This reflects involvement of the human papilloma virus within the mucosal epithelium of the upper aerodigestive tract. So there are two subtypes, which are implicated in this patients with RRP, the subtype 6 and subtype 11. So typically, this presents in the childhood, so in early in pediatric patients, secondary to viral acquisition or viral infection during vaginal delivery. Many resolve after puberty but may progress into adulthood. Adult onset RRP typically appears in the third or fourth decade of life, um, usually less severe, and is more likely to involve extralaryngeal sites and upper aerodigestive tract. Mostly, mostly presents with hoarseness, but in some cases, it can present as an obstruction in the upper airways. And how do you diagnose this? Uh, Endoscopy. So, an upper endoscopy can be done in order to check if there are papillomatosis in that area. How do you remove? Operative microlaryngoscopy with excision or laser ablation. Okay. So that would involve the use of a microscope. Surgery, ongoing rule for papilloma, especially if it's causing obstruction. In most cases, multiple procedures are typically required over the patient's lifetime, so it can be recurrent also. Medical treatment may also include intralesional injection of your cidofovir and oral indole 3-carbinol. Any questions so far? Simpa ba kayo? Are you guys still there?
Yes,
Budo.
Budo.
Yes, Budo.
Uh, if you have any questions or concerns, you just raise your hand. Okay? Open your camera or um, you can interrupt me anytime kasi I won't be able to see if nag-raise kayo ng hand if you have questions. Okay? Alright, moving on. Laryngeal polyp, very common. Orchitis edema, aka polypoid coditis, polypoid laryngitis, polypoid degeneration of the vocal cord. Okay? There's usually edema in the superficial lamina propria of the vocal cord. So this arises from injury to the capillaries with subsequent um, extravasation of fluid. So usually, presentation would include progressive development of a rough, low-pitched voice. This female are more commonly present, more commonly affected because of the lowered voice frequency is more evident compared to males. Causes multifactorial, common in smokers. There's evidence of a laryngopharyngeal reflux in some cases, hypothyroidism, as well as vocal hyperfunction. Most patients are heavy smokers and findings are typically bilateral. So for unilateral vocal cord polyps, these are most commonly seen in male. This can also occur secondary to capillary rupture within the mucosa. That's why there's edema by shearing forces during vocal abuse. So very common siya sa singers. Another risk factor would be the use of anticoagulants or antiplatelets. Okay. Management would include identifying underlying factors, of course, discontinuance of smoking if the patient is a smoker, reflux management by giving PPI, voice therapy in some cases, elective surgery under microlaryngoscopy for if there is polypoid choditis, and superficial excision under microlaryngoscopy for focal polyps. Cysts, very common. We know a lot of singers with vocal cord cysts, right? So this occurs in the underlying laryngeal mucosa, particularly in the regions containing the mucus secreting glands, such as your supraglottic larynx. Um, this may present in a variety of ways depending on the size as well as the origin. So we have to find out the origin. This may be very difficult to distinguish from a vocal cord polyp. Uh, what else? Videos soboscopic laryngoscopy may be necessary to establish the diagnosis. All right. How about the treatment? It depends on the size. If it's small and it doesn't have any symptom, or it's not causing any symptom, that we can observe this. But for large cysts of the supraglottic larynx, we need to do marsupialization with cold steel or SCO2 laser. Like marsupialization meaning you have to remove the cyst, including the capsule. Vocal cord paralysis, with at least the idiopathic type, may be a presenting sign of a malignancy which involves the lung, thyroid, or esophagus. That's why um, you need to investigate further if you have a vocal cord paralysis. Typically present with hoarseness and the voice may be breathy if the contralateral vocal cord has not compensated to close the glottic valve. We present uh, uh, as aspiration secondary to diminished supraglottic sensation. So the left vocal cord is more commonly involved secondary to longer course of the recurrent laryngeal nerve on that side. So mas longer and more parallel uh, to your uh, trachea. In children, this can manifest as stridor, weak cry, and respiratory distress. For adults, typically, um, adults do not exhibit signs of airway compromise. So unless paralysis is bilateral. So how do you diagnose? Usually, we do flexible fiber optic laryngoscopy, which confirms the diagnosis of a paralysis. The laryngeal EMG can also be done, which may be necessary to distinguish vocal cord paralysis from a mechanical fixation secondary to a scar tissue or cricoarytenoid joint fixation. Pictures. Laryngeal granuloma. Granuloma, as you know, is just a scar. This typically occur in the posterior larynx or the arytenoid mucosa. So lesions are typically secondary to reflux, voice abuse, chronic throat clearing, endotracheal intubation, and vocal fold paralysis. Patients report pain, often pain on swallowing, associated with swallowing. Diagnosis would include fiber optic laryngoscopy, voice analysis, as well as EMG. pH probe testing can also be done to rule out the possibility of of reflux. Treatment would depend on the contributing factors, of course. First line would be retraining therapy, as well as anti-reflux therapy. For granuloma, surgical excision is indicated when carcinoma is suspected and you need a biopsy. or when the patient has airway obstruction already. In selected cases, some granulomas may be considered as mature uh, and can turn into fibroepithelial polyp. So when the patient, a singer, for example, or a pervascular lesion. So these are examples of head and neck hemangiomas. Okay. Uh, Very common in pediatric patients. Mostly presents approximately 2 to 4 weeks after birth, but may rapidly proliferate during infancy and reach a plateau phase that and unless the hemangioma touches the airway visual axis, just like this one, or imposes psychological harm to a preschool age child, those tumors typically are allowed to spontaneously involute or they can spontaneously regress. So, hemangiomas are actually true neoplasm. Uh, proliferation, there's proliferation of the endothelial cells. Most common vascular lesion in infancy, as discussed in childhood. This presents 30% at birth, but no clinical presentation during this time. They usually grow with the child until age 5 or 7. So, uh, most resolve spontaneously. Surgery is still an option if without involution at 3 to 4 years of age. Other treatment options for hemangioma would include steroids, IV or systemic. This actually halts rapidly till 12 to 18 months. Other options would include sclerosing, such as ethyl alcohol, the like. Photodynamic laser surgery also works in some cases. Laser would include which is that that's 6 weeks in. In this case, treatment prefer in this well as well. And then top lasers and some majority are ano naman, flat. Neoplasm. Your vascular malformations are considered not a true neoplasm. It's almost always present at birth and slowly enlarged without proliferation, just unlike your hemangiomas. Um, in this case, there's an error in vascular morphogenesis. Okay, they arise from capillary, venous, veins, arteries, or lymphatics. An example is your Portwine stains or venular malformation. They often follow facial dermatomes and usually thicken with age. They present as purple masses or subcutaneous or submucosal nodules. Management, flash lamp, pump pulse dye laser or FPDL. Usual location uh, is your middle neck or your forehead. In children, it can also be present um, in the forearm, forehead. Okay. These are benign naman. So, Next would be your lymphangiomas or cystic hygromas, or these are lymphatic malformations. Um, Typical location is your neck, midline neck, or forehead. These are found in children, and surgical management is usually done, will not regress spontaneously. So a surgical treatment is indicated once you diagnose a patient or um, a child with cystic hygroma. It can be macrocystic and well demarcated. In some cases, this can become uh, infected because those are looked at. So, surgical intervention. Okay, stigma, this is an example. This can significant uh, uh, know the indication for requesting for a either a CT or an MRI or a simple radiographic study. Let's start off with the benign lesions of the head and neck. So, um, common is common benign lesions of the head and neck, or particularly the oral cavity, would be your mucocele, which is common in the lips, where your minor salivary glands are, as well as this is also called a mucus retention cyst or extravasation cyst. So those arising in the minor salivary gland appears in the submucosa of the oral cavity. So this would include your lower lip, the cheeks, the dorsal surface of the tip of the tongue, and the floor of the mouth. Um, just like here in the picture, you see that this is a well circumscribed and kind of bluish whitish in color. There's viscous fluid inside. If you will appreciate this if it erupts spontaneously or if you try to prick it. So common cases occur in young individuals, usually less than 20 years old. All right. Causes, most common would be mechanical injury. Those very common yan in patients na nagbabite ng lip. So there's mucosal injury. Okay. It's usually ano pa ba about because yan. So recurrence very low once you excise. Um, Similar to an epidermal inclusion cyst in the skin. And treatment of this type of lesion should be a simple excision or marsupialization. Just excise the capsule. Next would be a ranula. If your mucocele is a retention cyst from the minor salivary gland, your ranula is a type of retention cyst from major salivary glands, or sublingual. That's why it's usually located the floor of the mouth. Okay, accumulation. There's accumulation of secretions of the sublingual salivary gland. Mostly occurs, like I said, at the floor of the mouth. Epulis or granulomatous of the gingiva due to chronic irritation. So if these two are cysts, ito, granuloma or scar tissue siya. Secondary to chronic irritation. It looks malignant in some cases, and it can also bleed, just like any other granuloma. Um, Treatment would include excision, um, especially if it's in the gingiva and it causes bleeding. This is just it's benign. So it's just an exaggerated inflammatory response secondary to the irritation. Um, Only indication for excision would be if it's symptomatic, if it causes pain, discomfort, or bleeding. Next would be, well, papilloma. It's a wart-like growth on skin or mucous membrane. So it's derived from the epidermis, mostly benign or usually benign, can also appear on the tongue or the larynx, like I said a while ago. And it's usually soft, irregular, pedunculated in most cases. Treatment would include excision or in some cases, a cauterization. Granuloma, an example of granulomatous tissue. This is in response to infection or foreign body. Uh, it can look malignant in some cases. So if it's awkwardly located or there's suspicion of malignancy, a biopsy and excision biopsy should be done. Okay. Idiopathic. Next would be idiopathic aphthous ulcer or ulcerative lesions. Yan. Very common also. We call it singaw in Tagalog. You're very familiar with this. I'm sure you've had this once, maybe in your life. So it's a viral infection, which HSV type 1, usually. This is an indication, and this can be secondary to trauma pag nakagat, or it can also be a sign of a nutritional deficiency in B complex vitamins. So if you often have this, you better check ba kailangan nyo ng vitamin B complex. This can be treated with steroids, but most steroids in extreme cases, I think, because we all know that this can spontaneously heal. All right. Um, ano pa? What else? Do you know how to treat this? Yung mga taga-probinsya. Anybody? Anong ginagawa niyo pag may singaw kayo? None? Never? Kayo nagkasingaw?
Dok, nilalagyan ng asin nung matatanda.
Asin. Some would put asin or salt. Some would put tawas also. Have you heard about it? Yes, people are, wait lang ha. Let me just see your ah, sagot nyo. Wait lang. Suka, I haven't heard about suka, but yes, tawas. Ay, ano yung gentian violet? Tawas, suka. Tawas sa province. O, tawas. True. Diba? Tawas, actually. I mean, coming from a province, I'm very familiar with that. Suka, not asin siguro, pero siguro, suka, makes sense, right? What is gentian violet? Siyempre, hindi ako familiar. Dana. Gargle with warm water na may asin po. Oo, yes. Pero kapag medyo ah, malakas ang loob mo, asin lang. Singaw. Ang tawas talaga. Let me just, Debacterol? What is Debacterol? Parang medyo social na yung Debacterol. Pero ngayon, anong ginagawa sa pag meron? Di ba parang may gel na binibigay? Ay, for Beke. Oh, interesting. Ngayon ko lang narinig yun. I'll use that. Ay, hindi naman ako nagkakasingaw. Pero, oh, Nystatin. Okay. Oh, marami ako natutunan ngayong araw na to. Thank you, guys. Yeah. Diba? It's very common. Something that you encounter or you've experienced na okay? Sige, very good, guys. Marami akong natutunan. Okay. Hindi ko alam na ginagamit pala yun. Pambeke. Okay. Okay. Singaw. Balik tayo. I'll ask you again later. Steroids, actually hindi ko, very extreme yung steroids like I said, but in some cases, they do. Even if it's just singaw, you have to, especially in the elderly, you have to really examine it very well because there's a possibility of a malignancy in some cases. So you should do by manual examination to make sure that there's no mass in the area. Okay? Okay, tongue lesion. Pre-malignant. We are talking about pre-malignant lesion. Okay? Not so common ang malignancy of the tongue. Well, one of the at least top 3 or 5 of malignancy and not so good malignancy of the head and neck is the tongue. We have pre-malignant lesions. So, the first one would be your leukoplakia. Just to be clear, all these pre-malignant lesions that I'll be discussing here are secondary to chronic irritation. Okay? So again, going back, leukoplakia. White area on the mucosal surface cannot be scraped off even if you try to remove it, um, unlike your oral candidiasis. What do you usually do? This is associated with smoking and alcohol use. Management is an excision, biopsy, or incision if you are just trying to diagnose and to avoid irritants like your tobacco and alcohol. Next is your erythroplakia. This is an example of an erythroplakia. If your leukoplakia is whitish, your erythroplakia is bright red, it velvety patch. So there's a persistent asymptomatic oral erythroblastic patch, just like this one. Um, when present in high-risk sites such as your ventral surface of the tongue or the floor of the mouth, this may be an early or primary sign of an oral cancer. So about 85% of the cases, there's already signs of squamous cell carcinoma as seen on histologic evaluation. Alright. These are other two. Ito, mas medyo obvious na mukhang malignant. But these are still pre-malignant lesions. So the first one is your oral submucosal fibrosis or OSMS caused by betel nut chewing. Betel nut, very common. Saan yun na? Yung mga matatanda sa probinsya. Diba? Lalo na sa northern region. They love chewing betel nut. So this is a chronic potentially malignant condition of the oral cavity, which is characterized by progressive fibrosis. When there's fibrosis, there is some sort of parang scar formation. Kaya tignan mo, iba yung itsura niya. This can lead to stiffness and reduced mouth opening. So parang tumitigas yung tongue. There's also noted burning sensation, taste disturbances, as well as difficulty swallowing. About 3 to 10% of your OSMF may develop into oral cancer, although it's still quite small, 10%. But you should be very wary of patients or people with this kind of manifestation or tongue. Ayan, competition because of the fibrosis. Treatment, of course, you have to remove the irritant, which is betel nut in most cases. For symptomatic treatment, you can give medication to reduce the inflammation, steroids to improve mouth opening para mag-lessen yung inflammation, physiotherapy to maintain jaw movement. If it forms bands, you can release that through surgical intervention. It's very important that you diagnose this early to prevent the progression by removing the irritant and reduce the risk of malignant transformation. Next would be your oral lichen planus. This is a chronic inflammatory condition that affects the mucous membrane inside the mouth. So it's characterized by white, just like this one, lacy patches, red swollen areas, or open sores. So while often not serious, OLP can cause discomfort, especially if there are open sores. it can also increase the risk of oral cancer. So treatment, again, steroids, an option which can reduce the inflammation and are available as topical creams or gels. In mild cases, treatment may not be even necessary. So other medications would include cyclosporin or other immunosuppressants to manage the symptoms. Regular checkup very important in order to um, catch cancer early if it transforms. Okay. Question so far. Ako, odontogenic. Nasa odontogenic tumors pa lang tayo. Late kasi tayo nag-start. So, I'll make it fast na so I can discuss everything with you. So, do you have class after this?
Yes
Somebody?
po.
What time's your class?
10 a.m. po.
Ha?
10 a.m. po do.
Then, anong class niyo?
OB ward po. Ward
OB ward.
or block C po do.
For Block
So-
A po, Doc, Med 2 na preceptorials po.
I'm sorry?
For Block A, Med 2 na preceptorials po.
May preceptorial. So I'll make it quick, but don't worry. I'm going to upload the slides for this lecture. Okay, sige, let's move on. Thank you. Odontogenic tumors. These are tumors arising from progenitor tooth development. So it involves the mandible as well as the maxilla. Most are benign and can be managed conservatively. So most common would be your ameloblastoma or adamantioma. This came from dental lamina, which is associated usually with impacted or unerupted tooth. Very common in young patients. This is usually painless. Kind of rare, but is the most common odontogenic tumor. Make sure that you do by manual examination to appreciate the mass. This can be diagnosed just with an x-ray, just like this one. Pathognomonic, multiloculated. It can either be multiloculated or uniloculated in radiolucencies on plain radiograph. This is very slow growing and usually eroding the adjacent bone and soft tissue around the area. Treatment, if you have this, usually excision while it's small. Okay. Ameloblastoma. Okay. This can be classified into peripheral or central. If it's peripheral, then this is extraosseous, so outside the bone. If it's central, intraosseous siya. It can be either unicystic or multicystic or solid. Okay. Other tumors would include myxomas and pinworm tumors. They behave similarly as ameloblastoma and similar treatment excision as well. Both myxomas and pinworm tumors are calcifying epithelial odontogenic tumors. If your ameloblastoma is rare, ito mas rare ito. But they are potentially locally aggressive tumors and can occur in the jaw, just like your ameloblastomas. Your myxomas are typically mesenchymal. Okay, remember that. While your pinworm tumors are epithelial in origin. While both can cause swelling and expansion of the jawbone, they have different histologic characteristics as well as treatment approach. For myxomas, this can occur in various locations, which include your the jaw, the muscle, intramuscular. It can also be intramuscular. It can also be seen outside the head and neck region. So, slow growing, painless, can cause bony expansion. Treatment for this is surgical removal, which is the primary treatment, and early removal is important due to the risk of complications. So, your pinworm tumor is also benign. It primarily affects the posterior part of the mandible. it has a malignant transformation. While it's rare, it can transform into a malignancy. That's why it's important to make careful examination of the histopathology, that is. Okay. Another classifying odontogenic tumor is your Gorlin cyst. Um, it's also called ameloblastonic fibromas and keratocysts. Okay. Compared to the other two, it's less aggressive and may be treated effectively with just an enucleation and excision of the entire lining of the lesion. Not that, okay, we're done with the odontogenic tumors. We now go to non-odontogenic tumors. Non-odontogenic tumors arise from the bone, not related to tooth development, unlike your odontogenic tumors. Examples of which would be your exostosis ettori, osteoma, osteoid osteoma. Ayan. But lahat ng nakalagay dito. Okay? Your torus platinus usually forms from the midline of the hard palate. It's benign, bony growth that appears at the midline or roof of the mouth. It is common and harmless usually. Yan, dito. Okay, either sa baba or sa taas, but it's located in the midline. It can vary in shape. It can be flat, nodular, lobular, or spindle shape. Very common, this one. It's usually asymptomatic but can sometimes cause discomfort and pain in some cases while eating or if the patient is wearing dentures. Treatment is not necessary if it doesn't cause any problem or symptom. But if it interferes with speech or swallowing or discomfort because of the denture, it can be prone to trauma and ulceration, so it can cause pain. So removal is indicated already by doing surgery. Another one would be your torus mandibularis. So also common, usually in the lingual surface of the mandible, opposite the premolars. This one. Bone again, just like your torus platinus, it's a bony growth or exostosis. Okay, it's made up of dense, compact bone. In most cases, it's asymptomatic. If it becomes large and interfere also with your normal tongue movement, leading to speech difficulties, then an excision is again indicated. Exact cause, nobody knows. So it's a no. But in some cases, it is thought to be a combination of genetic predisposition and environmental factors. No treatment needed if it's asymptomatic. If it causes symptom, again, surgical removal is indicated. Symptoms would include pain, speech problems, or eating difficulties. Other odontogenic tumors would include exostosis osteomas. So your osteomas, exostosis, localized bone overgrowths, common in the jaw. Treatment is the same as torus. So if it's causing discomfort or pain, surgical removal is indicated. Osteoma. So exostosis can either be buccal as well. So this is an abnormal growth on the jawbone, often seen in the back of the mouth. Osteoma, slow growing, benign, it's still non-cancerous, most commonly found on the skull or facial bone. Sometimes you see patients dito, very common sa may forehead, matigas, bony growth. Those are osteomas. Depending on the size and the location, can sometimes lead to headache. In some cases, sinus infection or vision or hearing problem. So excision is advised when continued growth encroaches upon vital structures or if it's causing symptom. Treatment, yun, like I said, excision. Another example of non-odontogenic tumor would be your fibrous dysplasia. It's a benign bone disorder of unknown cause. One, cortical bone may be replaced by immature fibrous tissue. Management would depend on aggressiveness. Option ranges from observation to extensive local resection and reconstruction. The mandible and the maxilla are the most commonly involved areas. It can present similar to ameloblastoma, but there are no multiloculated radiolucencies on radiograph. Three of concern. One is since it's usually located in the maxilla or mandible, excision is always a challenge, as well as reconstruction. So dental evaluation as well, because that might affect the excision if you do surgery, as well as rehabilitation. Okay, let's move on now to head and neck cancer. I think mas mabilis na no. Ito. Because mas common na sa mas commonly seen na itong mga to. 90% are squamous cell carcinoma. Very important to know. This can, why squamous cell? Because the lining of your upper air digestive tract, which comprise the head and neck, is squamous non-keratinized epithelium. So, if it becomes abnormal or there are changes, it can either be an atypia or an overt malignancy. They have similar biologic behavior and carcinogenesis, local growth, local regional, and distant metastasis also. Okay. Usual presentation is a mass, an obvious mass, and hoarseness in SCC of the vocal cords. There's differences in the natural history. Patient survival, disease-free survival can affect the patient's function if the patient has cancer. Okay, sige. Alcohol and tobacco, most common preventable risk factors. Metal nut chewing is part of it. The risk factors, UV rays exposure. Sorry, excuse me. Excuse me. All right, sorry for that. Going back. HPV types, so 16 and 18, syphilis, Plummer-Vinson syndrome also are risk factors. Carcinogenesis, P53 mutations, and DNA damage initiation and promotion mutated cells. So what is the natural history? Usually you have a normal cell, squamous cell. In particular, there's hyperplasia, dysplasia, carcinoma in situ, then invasive carcinoma. Diagnosis is very important that you know they have a very clear clinical history. So you should be able to know the risk factors as well as the progression of the symptom. Physical examination, very important. You were taught how to do a PE of the head and neck, right? It's a second year. So you should be able to use that here. What else? Imaging studies, very simple. Depending on the location, you can request for CT scan and MRI or ultrasound. Endoscopic studies are very important, especially if there are laryngeal involvement. So hoarseness, endoscopy, bronchoscopy or upper GI endoscopy. Second, primary tumor. All right, you should be familiar with this, at least this term. When you say second primary tumor, approximately 14% of patients with head and neck malignancy or carcinoma will have a second primary tumor. The site of the second primary tumor depends on the inciting factor of the first primary. So, for example, oral cavity, usually second primary yan in the upper esophagus. If you have second primary tumor, the management will differ if there is a second primary, depending on the aggressiveness of the second primary. Be familiar with the term synchronous and metachronous. Okay, when you say synchronous, diagnosed within 6 months from the diagnosis of the primary CA, this is usually 3 to 4%. When you say metachronous, this is diagnosed after 6 months from the diagnosis of the primary CA. 80% of second primaries and 50% diagnosed within 2 years. So for head and neck malignancies, okay, ito lang. For third year kasi, we'll be discussing diseases already. So in surgery, you should be familiar with staging. Okay? Usually TNM staging yan, tumor node metastasis. So for head and neck cancers, in general, sorry, this is the TNM staging. Ito lang. Kasi marami kayong i-memorize na TNM staging, different parts. So this is just the first part. It's just I will give you a parang some sort of trick. Ay, hindi man trick, pero way of memorizing. Kung T for head and neck, 2 numbers, 2 and 4 lang ang i-memorize nyo. 2 and 4. Kasi may memorize yan. T1 to T4. So 2, less than 2, 2 to 4, more than 4, adjacent. And then, for nodal spread, ipsilateral 3 and 6. You remember 3 and 6. 2 and 4, 3 and 6. Okay, ito madali na lang to. Metastasis meaning there's already distant metastasis or tumor cells are seen in other parts of the body. Look na yan. M. M0, none. M1, meron. So, dito, 6. Ipsilateral singular less than 3. Ipsilateral, okay? So, memorize niyan. Kasi yung staging. Ito. If you're more visual, yan lang yan. Okay? Levels. Lymphatic, cervical level. Okay, for head and neck, prognosis of the patient is highly dependent on the involvement of your lymph nodes. So, prognosis would be very dependent on, well, the stage of the patient, especially if it involves nodes already. Okay? Most common primary sites in patient presenting with neck mass. So, nodal level. You have to know the levels of the neck. Level 1, level 2, 3, and 4. 5 is the posterior, and then 6 is middle. Okay? So, nasa larynx and thyroid gland ang 6. Why is it very important? Because metastasis of the head and neck malignancy would depend on the nodal level. So, kailangan memorize nyo yan. Okay? When you say cervical lymphadenopathy, we are talking about 2, 3, and 4. Posterolateral is 2, 3, 4, and 5. Central is 6. Okay? Alright. Management of head and neck cancer in general is usually multidisciplinary. So that would include your surgeon, either ENT or general, head and neck surgeon, radiation, oncologist, medical oncologist. Okay? Factors to consider would be surgery. Okay. Rule sa head and neck. If it's resectable, do resection. Or do the surgery. If it's not resectable, options would usually include 1, radiation or chemotherapy. Okay. Alright. Lip malignancy. Let's go na sa particular kung mahaba-haba ito. Lip malignancy, lip area. Transition from the external skin to the mucous membrane of the oral cavity or the vermilion border. Typical length is 6 to 7 cm. It's very important to know this for reconstruction purposes if you are going to do surgery. Risk factor would be UV exposure or sunlight, very common in Caucasians because they like, sunbathing and all. Immunosuppression, tobacco, of course. Majority of your lip cancer is located in the lower lip. So that's about 80 to 90%, and upper lip, oral commissure, 1%. Okay. Please, just like like your other head and neck cancer, this is predominantly squamous cell. Right? Management, surgical excision, of course, wide surgical excision with at least 1 centimeter, 1 centimeter margin. Right. Resection with primary closure is possible with if the defect is up to 1/3 of the lip. So, ano yung usual, ano ng lip? Diba, around ilang cm siya? I said a while ago, the 6 to 7 cm. So, if it's 6, around 2 centimeter. If the tumor is about 2, less than 3 or 2.5 centimeter, pwede primary closure yon. If not, kailangan na ng reconstruction. So, there are different types of reconstruction. So, larger defects, you can use flap, different types of flap. Okay, it's here in the picture. Arapancic flap, okay, with a lip switch, or a standard flap, and microstomia. Small mouth, it just means small mouth. So there's potential complication with lip reconstruction. We don't want a small lip because access nyo yan for food. Post-operation is also an option in this case. Tumor staging with neck node dissection. Okay, when you say neck dissection, meaning you remove the cervical lymph nodes. That's why you need to be very familiar with the levels. So that would depend on the extent of the tumor. For early stage lip cancer, tumor removal and lip reconstruction only. So if it's a T1 and T2 lesion, wedge resection with primary closure. Ano sabi ko sa inyo kanina? What is T1? T1 is less than 2. And then T2 is what? Hanggang 4 centimeter. So, pwede pa yun. But if you have T3 lesions, meaning more than 4 centimeter and tumors extending to outside, it's already locally advanced. So tissue resection, bilateral upper neck dissection, and complex reconstruction is already mandatory. Okay, oral cavity. This is just I won't discuss this anymore. You just have to review the parts of your oral cavity. Anyway, it's here in the picture. Okay. Clinical features of malignancy of the oral cavity and the mandible, usually common in elderly, 50 to 70 years old, male, smoking history, alcohol use, as well as poor dental hygiene. Surgery for oral cavity and mandible is wide excision. So wide and block resection, which is indicated, of course, a reconstruction is also mandatory. Okay? Composite mandibular resection and neck dissection operation, or the commando operation, is usually done in extensive cases. So in this case, a mandible is resected, part of the mandible is resected, as well as the soft tissue around it. tongue. I already discussed part of it, yung mga pre-malignant lesions kanina sa tongue. So, anterior 2/3 of the tongue, sa anterior tongue, alright? The anterior 2/3 is part of the oral cavity, but the posterior 1/3 is not anymore part of the oral cavity. Risk factors, sorry, mahihika ako. Tobacco, alcohol, chronic irritation as well. Okay, compared to other head and neck malignancies, tongue malignancy is more aggressive. Okay. Floor of the mouth. Okay, for tongue malignancy, this usually presents as a tumor. It can either be anterior. Okay, if it's posteriorly located, the first thing that you need to do is not exactly surgery. Again, posterior part of the tongue or back of the tongue, you do radiation first. But if it's an anterior part of the tongue, may it be lateral or medial, you do hemiglossectomy. So a wide excision of the mass. You have to remember, if you're dealing with cancer, you need to have a negative margin, meaning you have to have a significant margin depending on what type of cancer, kailangan negative yun to prevent the recurrence. So for tongue, that's the case. So you do hemiglossectomy. Since it's more aggressive compared to the other malignancies, for stage 1, you can do hemiglossectomy and or remember and or, so that's stage 1 T1, and or radiation or supraomohyoid neck dissection. When you say supraomohyoid neck dissection, that's levels 1, 2, and 3. I'll be giving you a table later to tell you the types of neck dissection. Okay, depending on the levels. They have names actually. Supraomohyoid is 1, 2, and 3 for stage 1 or radiation. Since, bakit may or and? Bakit may option na gano'n? Bakit hindi pwedeng hemiglossectomy na lang? Because, like I said a while ago, tongue malignancies are more aggressive. So, there's a 30% chance of an overt metastasis to the lymph nodes already, even if it's just a stage 1, meaning less than 2 cm. Okay? So, you either do neck dissection or radiation post-op. If you just did a hemiglossectomy, then you do radiation after. But you can do some sort of a prophylactic neck dissection, even for stage 1 tongue. Okay? Floor of the mouth, third most common site, usually 13 to 17%. There's very rich lymphatics below the floor of the mouth or within the area of the floor of the mouth. So, diagnosed in advanced stages. Majority of patients, or half of the patients, are already stage 3 or stage 4. Management, it depends. So wide excision, if it doesn't involve the mandible, if there's mandibular invasion, you include part of the mandible and as well as reconstruction. So you can either do a mandibulectomy if necessary, if it's invaded by the tumor. It can either be segmental or marginal. When you say segmental, you need to do reconstruction kasi like each chop mo siya. If it's marginal, you're not removing the entire segment in order to keep the mandibular function. This is usually done in early stages or early lesions. Okay, this is an example of a mandibulectomy. Remove the mandible and do reconstruction after. Reconstruction can be vascular, so that you can get bone from the rib or femur. Ay, hindi femur. Tibia. Tibia pala, sorry. Or iliac. May options. Ang nakita ko pala kasi coming from the rib at saka or fibular. Alright, nasa na tayo? Buccal mucosa. Buccal mucosa, 5% of uh, of oral cancer. Risk, again, would be tobacco. Okay? Hard palate. Kanina, um, I discussed about the ano, diba? Benign tumor of the oral cavity. This one here, adenoid cystic carcinoma, if you take a look at the picture here, if it doesn't look like an osteoma, ayan, nakita mo may parang necrosis around the area, uh, this could possibly be a malignancy. Okay? This rarely metastasized usually involves the minor salivary gland if it's located in the midline, just like this. So most likely this is a salivary gland. Pharynx. Again, anatomy, just review your anatomy. Esopharynx, special cases. This extends in the plane superior to the hard palate, from the choana to the posterior nasal cavity to the posterior pharyngeal wall, which includes the Rosenmuller fossa. It can be involved the eustachian tube orifices, adenoid path as well. So most of it are squamous cell in origin. For nasopharynx, surgery is not the first line, so radiation. This is the only cancer in the head and neck region na ang first line is radiation. If radiation didn't work, then sorry. If the radiation didn't work, then you proceed with, or if it's a recurrence, then you proceed with the surgery. Clinical symptoms include nasal stuffiness, obstruction, as well as epistaxis. Epistaxis, how do you diagnose? You do endoscopy, just like this one. In some cases, there's also hearing loss and neck masses. So, yan yung itsura niya on endoscopy. Survival rate is, 5-year survival is 25 to 30%. Oropharyngeal CA, you need to do endoscopy first. So if you do a biopsy and it turns out to be malignant, and then you do a laser excision or chemo or radiotherapy. Okay. The hypopharyngeal, there's throat pain, referred otalgia, as well as dysphagia. So from your hypopharyngeal area is from the hyoid bone superiorly to the lower border of your Kicker cartilage inferiorly. Okay, sige. Treatment, laryngopharyngectomy, radical neck dissection, as well as radiotherapy for non-resectable tumors. Hypopharyngeal area, PLO with gastric pull-up. If you have hypopharyngeal malignancy, when you say PLO or pharyngolaryngeal laryngeal operation and gastric pull-up, you remove the entire section of the hypopharyngeal area, and then you do reconstruction by doing a gastric pull-up or colonic interposition in some cases. Laryngeal cancer, like I said, if it's resectable, you do surgery. Resectability, assessment of resectability would include diagnostics. So you need to assess through diagnostics if it's resectable or not. If it doesn't involve large vascular structures, then it is resectable. Okay? So laryngeal cancer, you do laryngectomy. Laryngectomy would include the entire supraglottic, glottic, and subglottic area, as well as neck dissection bilateral, and in some cases, you need to remove the thyroid. Okay. Right. Neck masses. Okay. Sometimes you encounter just neck masses. Naku, 2 minutes. Alright, yun yung sinasabi ko sa inyo kanina. You have to be familiar with the levels of the neck. Okay, na-discuss ko na to kanina, nodal levels, lymphatic, it's very important to know the lymphatic drainage of the neck so that you can predict actually where where the origin of the cancer is if it just presents with a neck mass. All right, majority inflammatory, especially in young patients. In some cases, it's neoplastic. So, ito yung rule of 80s for the neck masses. Inflammatory, congenital, it can be neoplastic. So, benign, 20%. And primary and majority are metastatic, coming from either the oropharyngeal upper air digestive tract, even the stomach in some cases. All right. Rule of 7. 7 days, most likely it's just inflammation or infection, upper respiratory most of the time, or oropharyngeal. If it's within 7 months, it can be a tumor. And if it's 7 years or more, then it can be congenital. Inflammatory could include tuberculosis, which is very common here in the Philippines, lymphadenopathy, either bacterial or viral, coming from the upper respiratory tract. Tumor would include lymphoma, corroded body tumor, metastatic, and very common in the thyroid area. Congenital would include thyroglosal duct cyst, if it's midline, brachial cleft cyst, mostly lateral. History and PE, very important. Laryngoscopy, like I said a while ago, this is an example of the direct, hindi ko na ipapakita sa inyo. It's just a video of how a direct laryngoscopy is done. Biopsy, these are your options. Most common would be your FNAB or your fine needle aspiration biopsy or cytology. Core needle biopsy can be done in head and neck cases, especially in large tumors. Punch biopsy, okay. For tongue, if you are going to do biopsy, punch. Okay? Sabi ko sa inyo, tongue, punch biopsy. Excision biopsy, if it's small, especially in awkward places. Okay. All right. This would just tell you mga possible causes ng lymphadenopathies. Again, reference, you should know this. If you have a mass and it's most likely metastatic, if it's in this area, for example, then you have to investigate the oropharyngeal. It can be parotid if it's near preauricular area. Okay? Ito, very important that you know this table. Okay? Primary site can be in the oral cavity if it involves the levels 1, 2, and 3. That's why you have to be familiar. Okay? Ito yung importance ng table na to. It will tell you exactly where, not necessarily exacto, but at least you know where to start investigating if you have lymphadenopathies. Okay? And you're thinking of a malignancy. Yeah. For lip and tongue, upper 1, 2, and 3, supraomohyoid the tawag dyan. So when you say comprehensive neck dissection, this would include all levels, selective areas lang. Sinabi ko sa inyo kanina na central, 6, cervical, 2, 3, and 4, lateral pala, sorry. Lateral is 2, 3, and 4, posterolateral, 2, 3, and 5. Sorry guys, medyo extend tayo. Alright, these are the different types of selective neck dissection. So selective ibig sabihin nun, particular levels lang. So my name supraomohyoid is 1, 2, and 3. Extended supraomohyoid, that would include extension to the either posterior or anterior or central. Central is 6. Okay? Ayan. Remember this table. Alright, for modified radical neck dissection, this would include all levels, and then you just have to take note of the preservation of vital structures such as your IJ and SEM. Okay, nakalagay na lahat dyan. It's an example of an incision if you're doing a neck dissection, exposure of your SCM, Right? Okay. Sige, nandyan na ba yung IM? Naku, sorry. You need to go to to UE or online din? Guys, are you still there?
For section C po, Doc, we have face-to-face po na warning.
Face-to-face award.
Uh,
Sige, anyway, this is recorded. I'm sure some of you is recording
Oo.
this. For those who can stay, please stay. If those who need to go, you can go na. But I will try to finish a few more slides and try to explain. Anyway, if you have questions, you can message me directly. I'm pretty sure you still know my number, or at least your liaison officers know my numbers. You can get it, or it's difficult kasi if you email me. So you can just message me directly if you have questions regarding this. Sorry for starting late. Medyo nagka-problema lang tayo, technical problems. Okay? So if you need to go, okay lang. Go ahead. But I'll finish the slides. Okay? Sige, I'll continue na. So if you need to go, you don't have to to say bye-bye. You can just leave kasi may class kayo. I'm so sorry for extending. Okay, moving on. Okay, for staging, indications for neck dissection. Okay, depending on the tumor. Okay, in advanced cases, stages 3 and 4, most likely you need to do neck dissection. But for stage 1 and 2, it depends. If it's aggressive, just like your tongue, you need to do neck dissection even for stage 1. It's an option. It's like a prophylaxis. And it's predictable where it's going. Kasi nga, you know that oropharyngeal would usually go to levels 1, 2, and 3. Okay? Elective versus prophylactic. Elective meaning there's already an overt, there's an overt metastasis to the neck, to the cervical lymph node, so that's why you have to remove it. If it's prophylactic, meaning there's not clinically evident lymph node metastasis, you do it because there's a big chances there's already metastasis, just like in your tongue. Therapeutic, ayun, presence of gross metastasis. I'm sorry, clarification. Therapeutic, there's already an overt metastasis. Elective or prophylactic, absent gross. So therefore, either when you say there's presence of gross metastasis or clinically positive node, this can either be through physical examination. Kaya bigla akong nalito yung elective, meaning it can be clinical. Clinical meaning not necessarily through physical examination, but through diagnostics like your ultrasound. Staging, you know this already. I gave an example a while ago. So, like for D, 2 and 4, diba? For N, 3 and 6, ipsilateral, contralateral. Right? Node staging. This can be found in Schwartz. So stage 1, very important that you know this kasi there's separate parathyroid. Salivary gland can either be major or minor. Minor salivary glands can be seen on the oropharyngeal area. They secrete saliva, the largest of which is your parotid gland, which is located in the preauricular area. The salivary glands is your parotid because it's the largest. So okay, the larger it is, the malignancy is smaller. Okay, so baliktad. Oropharyngeal, if you see a tumor at the minor salivary gland, most likely it's, but if it's mucoepidermoid. For your minor salivary gland, you have your adenoid cystic carcinoma, adeno-CA, and mucoepidermoid. Okay. Very important to know the anatomy of your parotid gland. Like I said a while ago, usual presentation is preauricular mass. If you have preauricular mass, then you should highly consider a parotid tumor. Not necessarily malignancy, but parotid tumor. Okay? It's located in the retromandibular mucosa. Important ang parotid gland because it traverses your facial nerve traverses your parotid gland. It actually separates it from the superior or superficial in the deep part of the parotid. Not necessarily locus, it's just a one gland. Okay, unlike your thyroid, which has a right and left lobe, ito hindi. Isang gano'n lang talaga siya. It's just separated the deep part. Your facial nerve separates the deep part from the superficial part. Okay. So, ganito yung this is your ear. So, preauricular, if you do a flap, you'd be able to expose the parotid gland already. Okay. Okay. Benign. Okay. If it's a benign tumor of the parotid, you do superficial parotidectomy. You do not do enucleation. Again, for parotidectomy, you do either a superficial parotidectomy, meaning you remove the tumor, part of the parotid above the facial nerve. So you always have to identify the facial nerve and its branches. How many branches? 5. Okay. If it's malignant, then no questions asked. You do total parotidectomy while preserving the superficial nerve, the facial nerve as much as possible. How do you diagnose? Through physical examination. You only need diagnostics if you're dealing with a large tumor, the preauricular area. Management, like I said a while ago, superficial parotidectomy, always preserving the facial nerve or the cranial nerve 7. So this is usually the incision. You do a flap, and then you expose the facial nerve with its branches. Trunk, then 5 branches. Submandibular gland tumor, 50% chance of a malignancy. So, ganun pa din. You do excision. You only do neck dissection if there's if it's therapeutic. You only do therapeutic. You don't do prophylactic neck dissection for submandibular tumor. Okay. In summary, okay, so konti na lang to. In summary, you have for head and neck tumor, you have to have a good history and physical examination as well as examination PE, which would include bimanual oral examination and endoscopy if necessary. Diagnostics would include, like I said, endoscopy, CT scan, or MRI. Ultrasound is especially very important in assessing lymph nodes. So between a CT scan and an ultrasound, the best way to assess the lymph nodes, the characteristics of the lymph nodes, if it's malignant or not, is through ultrasound rather than CT scan. So there are certain features in ultrasound that would tell you that the probability of the malignancy of a lymph node. Okay. So for early stages, you have to know the staging, at least for malignancy, TNM, for head and neck. Very easy to remember. Habang wala pang ibang binibigay sa inyo, memorize nyo na to. Okay? 2 and 4 for T. And numbers 3 and 6 for N. Okay? Ipsilateral, bilateral. You remember the picture. You memorize yung picture. Hindi kayo mawawala. And then, ang i-memorize nyo na lang yung stage 1, T1, N1, and 2, or 100. Ako ganun memorize 100, 200. So, you check kung ano yung may A, B. So, stage 1, stage 2, 100, stage 1, 100, stage 2, 200, ganun, para madali nyo matandaan. Okay, for advanced, for early stages, you can do radiotherapy and surgery. Surgery in most cases or radiotherapy after. For advanced stages, stage 3 and stage 4, you need to do surgery, chemotherapy, and radiotherapy. For nasopharyngeal carcinoma, you have to remember that primary treatment is not surgery, but rather radiotherapy. Okay? These are the references for this lecture. And wala case discussion na yan. All right, this is just an example of use actually for case discussion. So, for your preceptorial, those who are here pa, for preceptorial, yun na lang ba kayo? Konti na lang kayo. All right, malamang isang section. All right, for preceptorial expectations, ano na, it's the preceptorial for third year is very different from second year. Skills lang kayo second year. Masaya lang yun. Para lang kayo naglalaro. But for third year is very different na. So you'll be given a case. So you need to have a history, physical examination. If there's an actual patient, you need to interview the patient, do physical examination. Okay? Or if there's no patient in the ward, you'd be given history, physical examination. Based on the history and physical examination, you will have a diagnosis or at least an impression and differential. So in the preceptorial, you'd be discussing that. You'll be presenting the history, physical examination, and then your impression and why. And then based from that, you need to tell your preceptor how will you work up the patient. So diagnostics. So ganun yung pagkakasunod-sunod. History, PE, then you have your impression, differentials, and then based on your differentials and your primary impression, you request for diagnostics. Yung kailangan lang. Okay? You need diagnostics in order to rule in or rule out your differentials. Okay? So if you need to request for a CT scan, you have to know why. Okay? After that, if you need biopsy, what type of biopsy, ganun. So, pwede nyo pag-practicean yung case na nandun sa end. Okay? What else? And then management. Once you've diagnosed it already, what's the management? So, part of the management would be surgical, knowing the surgical indication for surgical treatment, as well as medical. Okay? What else? Okay. Do you have any questions? Yung mga natira pa dito. Do you have any questions? Doc, I would like to. Ay, okay. Sinabihan ako ni Doktora Sagayaga na sabihin sa inyo na wala pa rin silang listahan. They don't have the list, the official list yet of those who are enrolled, so wala pang groupings. She's still working on it. She will just post it as soon as mabigay. Kasi the registrar cannot give us still the final list. Preceptors room assignments pa lang po yung nakapost. Ano ba to? Since the wala pa, guys. So I'm so sorry. This is section, ano kayo? Section A? Yeah. Section B. You wait. You just wait until this afternoon. Okay? She's working on it. Ang hirap kasi na hindi kami mabigyan ng list. Okay? You wait until we will contact you through your liaison officers. Any more concerns or questions? All right. I'd be giving Dr. Sagayaga 25 to 30 questions for this lecture. Okay. If you have any questions, you can message me directly through Viber. I'd be able to answer you guys. Okay? If there are no more questions, I'd like to thank you for staying. Thank you guys. Good luck. Bye-bye.
Thank you po, Doc.
Thank you, Doc.
Uy, galingan nyo guys. Third year na to.